And welcome. Hello, Crystalline.
Hello, I'm so excited. I love these things so much.
I know, and it has been a long day, and um I will warn you if I start sweating profusely, it's because I'm in a very hot attic right now.
Right. Yeah. We are in Gemini season now, so we're in that last month of spring before the sun really gets to take control. So I'm sure the attic is warm.
Yeah, we're gonna invest in air conditioning in the studio this summer. But with that, I just realized I love that we're staring at our faces. Should we take our presentation down for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, it was good branding for a second, but we can we can look at that later.
I just realized I'm like
It was a
we're
good intro.
and now the intro. I'm gonna
Yeah.
hand it over to you, Crystalline.
So we are doing our Gemini season Ask Me Astros today. We have a really cool question that is one that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with. And the timing of the question seems really profound, but also being able to kind of show how an astrologer would seek to answer this question, which is related to relationships, which is
Yeah.
a big topic that a lot of people visit astrologers for. I think it's going to be really cool to just show, like, here are some of the main things we look at when we're looking at relationships, and then timing having to do with questions pertaining to relationships. One of the major techniques we'll be able to cover today is one that a lot of people have probably heard of. It's called annual perfections, and it's a Time Lord technique. So we'll be explaining what all that means and really showing what it looks like in practice in a traditional way and in the more not common, the more familiar way that we're used to right now as we add some depth to it.
I like how there's like total levels because we're already taking something obscure and we're like something even more obscure. But here you're with us, you like
Mhm.
astrology, so you're here for the ride. Um, I think this chart's also really interesting, Crystalline, because it's this person has really been, for a lack of a better term, getting hit by some of the more difficult transits
Yeah.
that have been surfacing for the past 18 months, which is to say the eclipse seasons that we are now just about to transition out of into a new part of the sky.
Mhm.
So that's sort of like a side story we'll present here.
Yeah, and what I find interesting, and we'll be able to see the chart a little bit later, no worries. But one thing you're going to notice is that the eclipses are now moving away from this person's lunar sign. Their moon is in Scorpio, and the eclipses have been happening in the Taurus Scorpio axis, which for this person isn't angular. We've talked about angular
Yeah.
things being more to the fore in our life experience before, but the moon is still quite personal. So
Yeah.
that's made it personal, even though it's not quite on the angles. But as these the nodes, which tell us where the eclipses are going to happen, as they move out of the Taurus Scorpio axis, they're actually moving into the Aries Libra axis, and this person is an Aries sun. So the next 18 months may also take it from the emotional processing, and they actually move out of struggle houses and
Yeah.
into beneficial houses. So I would say perhaps the condition does improve from here on out, but we're learning how to process and become what life has shown us over the last 18 months, and we'll be doing that over the next 18 months with the eclipses. Is one of the ways that this could show up.
Absolutely. And you know what? I have one more thought on that, but I'm
Mhm.
going to hold it until we look at the chart,
Okay.
because I know we wanted to start a little bit with the current moment,
Mhm.
right? So
It
just
is
to
a
like
moment.
warm us up to like the sky as of right now. But before that, are those new glasses? Because they look really good.
I've had a lot of eye strain lately, and these are my
Yeah.
blue light glasses. And something that's interesting for me, I'm trying it again. Every once in a while, I go through a phase where I'm like, I can do it again, and I'll probably prove myself wrong. As you may have noticed, I have these lovely scars that I don't hide,
Yeah.
because that's where I had my surgery when I was 10.
Yeah.
And so there's really important things happening underneath the skin there. And the glasses, if I wear them for too long, will push on that. So I can only wear them for a certain amount of time. But because I've had eye strain lately, these are just blue light filter glasses. Apologies to anybody who thought I actually wear glasses. I, so far, still have 20/20 vision.
I do not have 20/20
Yeah.
vision. I've been
I
wearing
love
contacts since the
glasses.
third grade.
Yeah.
You can wear them for me. I officially should wear glasses, so you
The
can
thing is,
just.
they'll hurt me long term, so I can't. I would probably have to be one of those people who goes straight to contacts, just because I've looked into what they're called, nose pens or nose pinch. It's French for nose
Yeah.
pinch. So that's the kind of glasses I would have to wear. But they're not staying on my face.
They're like, by the way, they're really dirty.
What?
They're just in
Oh,
front of
but
me.
they're adorable.
Wait, nose pinch? Let's talk about
Yeah,
this for a moment.
they're
They
so here's I forget what they're actually called, but they're glasses without the arms. And so I looked that up, and in looking up glasses without the arms, I learned the term not let me see. Glasses without arms. It's like Nas pens or something like that. I'm gonna spell it wrong.
it
I get
sounds
it
like a
right.
monocle.
Oh, it's pince nez. I got it backwards. Pince as in like pincer or
Yeah, yeah.
pinch. Nez as in nose. And that's what they call the glasses that just like sit and pinch your nose and stay there without arms. They're like two what do you call monocles? Two monocles in one. So it's like bonacles, I guess. But
That feels very Martian to me, the pinching. I don't know what
yeah, I mean,
planets we would.
in doing some light research, it's not the most comfortable way to wear glasses. It's certainly not the most aesthetically pleasing either for what I would expect it to look like on my face. So I just stick with these for a portion of the day where I'm looking at the screens the most and hoping it helps out. But
I was Gemini season 2.
oh yeah.
Twins. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually forgot I was wearing them, which says good things about them. These are from Amazon.
Very nice. We can all order them.
Yep.
And twin. Speaking of, hello Sky. What should we pull up like a chart of the moment to share?
So yeah, I have one at the ready if you would like. I can share my screen.
That would be
super
fantastic,
fast.
friend.
I'm gonna just make sure that for anonymity's sake, I pull this over here and make it its own window. Bear with me. I'm going to request to share my screen. And okay. Cool. So here we have the current transits. It's a little bit busy, but the thing that we're looking at primarily is going to be this, so I can clean it up a little bit. And it's the Mars-Pluto opposition is pretty spicy.
Yeah, it was funny because we were talking about this. Like, I woke up this morning and I was traveling and I was like, oh, the sun's in Gemini. That's like nice. And like Mercury, I was like, oh, that's so nice. So, like, Mercury stationed before the sun moved into Gemini, and like Mars moved out of Cancer. That's pretty chill. And then I was like, oh shit, Pluto. Which I feel like sums up the sky right now.
Yeah. So the fun thing that we see happening here too is Mars is also, you can see, in partile aspect with the sun. Mm-hmm. So Mars actually today perfected this sextile. The sun had this the sun's headed toward Mars. So I think this is the waning sextile towards their Cazimi, which I think is going to happen in Scorpio, if I remember right, which is pretty interesting. Yeah. So we have the sun approaching Mars, finishing this cycle. And then Mars, on the same day that is getting a little like hand out or hand up from the sun, is also finishing up this face off with Pluto. And one of the things that I'm seeing here, as we see an aspect that is in opposition, it looks like a taut rope, like a rope that's pulled in tension. And so tension can be created by an opposing aspect. And actually, opposition aspects are given the nature of I think it is of Saturn. So Saturn creates that tension because Mars does squares.
Mars squares, yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about Mars Saturning towards Pluto, there's this tension and this I'm not willing to give in. I'm not willing to give in. So we're just going to be two opposing forces pulling in each direction. It's a tug of war, and that rope is pulled tight. And I think tug of war is very adept for any kind of opposition with Mars. And seeing how that's working out right now.
It feels like an opposition with like, but both parties are like throwing hand grenades at each other.
Well, and the way it seems to be showing up in the headlines, because I would look at the headlines for this,
Yeah.
because it is Pluto involved. And Pluto, one of the things Pluto does handle is buried things or owed things or power struggles, right? So we're looking at power struggles in a heavy way right here.
Yeah.
And the headline that nobody can stop talking about right now is the power struggle going on, especially in the United States Congress right now. But I know
Yeah.
that there are various versions of this happening all over the world. Um, the power struggle happening in Congress over the debt ceiling,
Yeah.
which will have a global ripple effect one way or the other at this point. So I see this as the debt of Pluto pulling
Mhm.
on the conflict and the battle that Mars wants to play out. And
Mm.
one way or another, Pluto is the generational mover, right? So Pluto is saying, hey, we're in this new generation, but I'm headed back towards Capricorn, which is a lot about infrastructural finances. Government can fall into there. So we see this opposition of this power struggle that's trying to emerge into a new generation. And I wonder how much that will carry as Pluto's saying, yeah, but I'm going to take a step back.
It's interesting because you say that one of the implications, right? Again, I'm going to say broadly speaking, because I'm not the most informed on this topic, but what I do know is what people are fearing is that like the devaluing of the US
Yeah,
currency, right? And that's a
big
huge
one.
thing. So like there's this it's like that Plutonian of just like, if we think about, I mean, this is a story though, right? Like that goes back like hundreds of years that we've
Mhm.
just been kind of like holding this currency together in a sense, these sort of very fragile systems.
Yeah.
And Pluto is just kind of like, no, 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 like face the repercussions of this. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we definitely see, you're right. It is
Yeah.
bringing back that sort of historical weight.
Well, and absolutely. And if we bring that again, this is so American centric again,
Mhm.
but it's we're finishing up Pluto finally getting out of Capricorn for the first time,
Yeah.
where we had the first Pluto return of the United States, or at least of the Declaration of Independence, but the United States as well, right?
Yeah.
Because that all
Yeah.
happened with Pluto still in Capricorn. And so we're getting that. And this being again Capricornian, if you look at the Sibley chart, that was very much a second house situation, which
Yeah.
is finances and things.
Yeah.
There are various charts that are workable for various purposes. Last year at NORWAC, there was an excellent talk on the Pluto return. If you go to NORWAC's website, you can probably get the recording of it. I highly recommend it. You can hear me be absolutely wrong in response to one of the questions on the recording, but it was great because I got to be corrected and now I know better, and now I get to bring it to you. But it's something to be aware of, that, as you're saying, this is historic because this would be the first time that this would happen in history of America.
Mm.
And I had this great opportunity when I was like 17 to be a student ambassador to the UK, and we met members of parliament there. And someone asked, like, what's the one thing that you would recommend to Americans or to the American government having the lasting structure that you guys have had for quite a long time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just said, keep learning. Don't think you know everything. And when you think about even just our country, 200 years or 200 and however many years we're at this point is not long in the scope of history, like you say.
No.
And this, I think Richard Tarnas is probably watching these things pretty closely right now, especially since we just finished up that Pluto-Jupiter square last week, which was the opening square between Pluto and Jupiter that happened. Let's see if I can still bring this up. So we have Pluto down here, and Jupiter is over here in Taurus.
Yep.
I think you can see yeah, you can.
Yes, I can. Although I'm just going to comment,
Mhm.
this like all purple screen, clearly you have good vision.
There.
Okay, better. Thank
Better?
you. Yeah.
I just like dark screen stuff because it saves batteries and stuff. Yeah. So Jupiter is over here,
Yeah.
and Pluto is down here. They are in a square together. The last time they met up was in 2020, in April, in June, and November, coinciding with some spikes of COVID-19 that year. I know a lot of us astrologers were watching that kind of coincidence that happened. Coincidence, not coincidence, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when Mars and Pluto were in conjunction, it was actually last year they were in conjunction right at the end of February, beginning of March, which we may recognize as a time where some tensions arose in certain parts of the world that is not the United States, actually.
Yeah.
But it also happened at the exact conjunction, on the day of the exact conjunction of the Pluto return of the United States, which is why I really subscribe to the theory that this is a Pluto return of democracy as a model.
Yeah.
Not just the United States, because a lot of people, as the person from Norwalk last year pointed out, a lot of people modeled their democracy models off of that. So it stands to reason that that is what's being tested right now. So you can see how these things are coming up. And in fact, of the 2 names of leaders that came up last year in the beginning of March, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've seen those names coming up again as though to recall that happened. And I'm wondering if we're going to get some more focused headlines, or if the debt ceiling thing is going to be what we see this time.
Picking your brain about this, thinking that Jupiter, right? Jupiter returns take 12 years. So, right, this is the first time Jupiter has been in Taurus since Uranus went over those degrees a few years ago. This is like rather recent history. And so thinking about all the tumult that Uranus has sort of brought up, and now Jupiter and Pluto are meeting here, we can kind of see that repetition as well.
Yeah. Well, and the fact, to add to that, that Jupiter will be, I'm going to get rid of my things here. Jupiter will be approaching over the next year, because Jupiter's only hanging out in Taurus until like May 25th of 2024.
Yeah.
So we have Jupiter for a full year here, but that means that over this next year, Jupiter will conjoin Uranus. So that's going to be something interesting to notice. Next month, Mercury, on I believe June 4th, will conjoin Uranus too. So we'll get a little bit of a taste of that as well. Both of those being pretty chaotic.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is in a sense, we could say this is a story. I mean, there are multiple cycles of stories here, but we could say maybe even this is a story that goes back to the Uranus ingress, in
2018.
18?
Whew.
I like it when I can remember dates.
Right? Isn't it great? I was terrible at dates when I took history class, but then I became an astrologer.
Yeah, I know. It's the only thing that makes me remember. On a brighter note.
Yeah, let's talk about fun stuff or optimistic stuff.
On a brighter note, I mean, it is nice. I'll still hold this, that Mercury has decided, is coming slowly but surely out of the beams, and that we have a direct Mercury as the sun moves into Mercury's sign. Like, that's something. That could have been way worse. We could have had that, like, that really intense eclipse season. It could be worse.
It absolutely it could be. Yeah, so it was. I'm glad we're on the other side of that. And I hope that viewers are noticing this as well. Mercury retrograde and the eclipses happening at the same time. It just seemed like, and I've heard a lot of my clients mentioning this, one punch after another punch. And just when you're like, okay, that has to have been the last one, another one bites the dust. And it was just like, I'm someone who has I have Jupiter in Cancer in the 9th. So I have an exalted Jupiter, which is quite a pious planet in essence, in a very pious position in the chart. And so philosophy, astrology, faith, spirituality, those things are like my jam. And so I have a pretty constant connection with my spiritual beliefs and the higher beings or whatever that I connect to. I don't tell anybody what to believe, but focusing on what I believe, I connect to those a lot, those energies. And I was even like, listen, I know you're there and stuff, but if you could knock it off, we'd be cool. And I finally saw in the last few days hints of the return on investment. Speaking of Jupiter, the return on, here's why that happened. Here's what you worked for. Here's what you were enduring enough to get to the other side for. And actually, we have the Sun square Saturn happening next week. You'll see their square. The sun's going to get to 6 degrees. And so that's going to show us as well, like, what you've been working for. What do you need patience in order to outlast, so that the solution can come at the right time rather than too soon or too late. And that's one of the interpretations I have of that. And of course, today we're not feeling that right now because Mars is involved, and we're like, I just want to push. I want to do that final push that gets me to something. And later Saturn's going to be like, it's worth the wait though. Just try. So,
Absolutely. It's an interesting because I was thinking about how just it's a big shift it is, right?
mhm,
With the sun moving into Gemini and even just in general, the Mars moving into Leo. I don't know, like for a lot of my clients, my friends, me, um, it's because the this eclipse season and this Mercury retrograde was angular for me, and it was
mhm,
the last in a very long story for a lot of us.
mhm,
And, I experienced, like, a purge, and I know a lot of other people did, like, a depletion of my energy. I happened to be, like, in Morocco and, like, all sorts of just, like, out of it, like, allergies, like, I couldn't sleep, a little bit of time stuff, but, like,
mhm.
at one point, I was, like, so sick, and I realized I had forgot to, like, drink coffee, and I was, like, having, like, horrible coffee withdrawals, and so it literally felt like this, like, week when we were in the midst of all this stuff, that I was like, "Oh my god, I feel like I'm purging," and it really was, and it was like, had to sleep more, and then I woke up, and there's something like I think we're all, like, now that we're kind of out of the dragon hole, we're slowly emerging. Mercury is, like, chilled out or whatever, but it does
Mhm.
feel like, I don't know, it felt very cathartic. I don't know if you saw that with people too, like, almost like when you have, like, a spiritual, whether it's like a psychedelic experience or like a
Mhm.
Reiki experience and you get, like, sick and you, purge it,
Mhm.
it was like that.
Yeah, well, and I think it really speaks to where that shows up in your chart too, right? Like,
Yeah.
because for you, Taurus is in the 10th, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I know your chart. Um, but for me, it was also in the 7th. And so I
Mhm.
was dealing with a lot of like, why do I define myself so much? And what I do and all my energy goes to what other people need from me. And I was losing myself in that. And so what I did last week was I was just like, social media is dead to me. I'm not going to do it. And if I do come back to it, I'm making it work for me and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And over the weekend, I because I am a Taurus sun, I guess, I grappled with it. So it was a purge, but it was more like for me, it was a an execution. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to destroy this because I don't want it anymore. I'm going to push it out. And then I'm going to remold it to do what I want it to do because I don't like feeling like my energy belongs to others because then they're not getting me, they're getting like threads of it. And I think that that really also relates into the person that we're talking to today. Um,
I'm gonna say one more thing to that because I think it's a really interesting Mercury piece to add
mhm,
on because I had a similar experience in that for me, right, like, I came in to this Mercury retrograde, I don't know what I was thinking. My son's in Aries, so I was just, like, coming hot, I'm gonna do this, and I had all these things that I wanted to do, like, these interviews, and just I was like, "This
mm,
is how it is," and I, like, stacked up all of these things for myself, and then I got sick, like, I traveled, like, life got in the way,
mhm,
and it was such a Mercury experience where I was like, "Oh, shit." Like, I, had to, reconfigure, and it forced me to slow down and actually reevaluate everything I'm doing, which
mhm.
and I was like, "Of course, like, this is what Mercury retrograde is. Who is I thinking I'm gonna, go straight head forward?" And it was, like, this really beautiful moment where I was, like, frustrated at first because things weren't coming together, but then I was like, "Oh, okay. Actually, there's
Mhm.
a different way to do things."
Yeah. And we talked about that a lot with the people in our AMA on Patreon, the people
Yeah,
that come in and we get to do like actual teaching and actual
yeah,
like one-on-one AMA. We did a
yeah,
lot of Mercury retrospective in
yes,
there, which I really enjoyed being able to see it, how did this person relate to it where it was angular for them and how did this person relate to it when it wasn't angular but there was still some kind of subtlety. And the one thing that you brought up in there that I encourage everybody listening to
yeah,
also think about, and you kind of mentioned it now, is what was Mercury telling me? It's not like
mhm,
the planets are always take a thing away, right?
yeah,
There
yeah,
is there is that, especially when you deal with Saturn. You have the two sides of Saturn. Saturn's going to take away
mhm.
because you don't need it. Saturn is could use a little bit more Marie Kondo of an attitude. Like, does this bring joy? No. Thank it and let it go. Saturn's like, it doesn't bring you joy. Just trust me. Like, I don't know what joy is, but that's not it. Go find it. And so I feel like Mercury in retrograde does a lot of the same thing. What's moving, what's efficient, what's working, what's connecting. And if it isn't, if it's a speed bump, you're going to hit it so that you can notice that's not it.
So brilliant, but I'm never gonna forget the
Right.
Mercury could use a little more Marie Kondo. So good. I don't know what joy is, but that's not it.
That was for Saturn. Saturn doesn't, joy's not in Saturn's wheeled house, you know. I was doing a lot of skits for next week. Saturn was involved, so I spent a lot of my morning just being like this. And I talk to the planets as I'm doing that, trying to make sure that I'm representing the aspect. And Saturn's not there for joy. And one of the things that the struggles of the last few months, I hope this helps everybody watching, has taught me is I have my sister-in-law was like, how do you find your joy in life? And I was like, you know what? I'm not in a joy time right now. I'm in a sit with the things that aren't joy so I can know what joy looks like and then go towards it. And I think that's just as valuable as being in a joy time. And now listen, I have a prominent Saturn opposite my Jupiter. So they balance each other out and they duke it out all the time. And maybe that's something that is unique to my mindset. But I just feel like if I were happy all the time, I'd never actually be happy.
You know, it's funny. My partner the other day was like, "You never have fun with me." And I was like, "I don't have fun. Have you met me?" Which I smile and I laugh, but I'm like, "What is this fun? We have things to do."
Well, and for some people, fun is different. Like if you ever find someone with a Capricorn or a Virgo or a Taurus in their fifth house, they might not be as jovial and throwing glitter as someone with maybe Sagittarius or Gemini in the fifth
which is
house.
hilarious.
Like for me, what's fun is reading ancient astrology texts and giving you quotes for today's PowerPoint. That's my fun. And I have Pisces in the fifth, so but I really enjoy stuff like that. And I think that there's something to be said about someone's definition of fun and another person's definition of fun, and honoring and accepting and relating to that, which again, I think is another topic that's going to come up to play with our question for the day.
Fantastic. Let's jump into it. And I'm gonna throw a curveball at you.
Oh no!
So we didn't have a chance.
I'm terrible at sports, everybody. I don't know where this is gonna go.
I actually don't know what a curveball is. I just know that's what people say when they throw things at other people.
Oh, okay.
Like,
it's a baseball reference. I grew up on a baseball field. I do not play.
I was scared of balls growing up, so I can like use the terms, but I'm like, actually,
they always find my head.
Me too. Flying objects, terrifying.
Yes.
That being said, I'm going to propose that you and I, because we're going to be together at Norwalk, do a special IG live where we address the questions we didn't get to this week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Perfect.
Done. Schedule it. Stay tuned, people.
Let me happening over the weekend for anybody who's interested. I'm sure we'll post about when that happens, but it's beautiful.
Okay, stop.
Well, that's like you just tossed it to me where it was easy to catch because it's something I love. So
look at I did that.
Yay, look at that. It's us again.
Okay. Oh no, I have to go to this. Friends, this is the first presentation I made, so be gentle with me.
It's actually very beautiful. Trust me.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna start here. This is the opening slide, everyone.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you just click on the screen, it'll also move forward. So you don't have to worry about the arrows if you don't feel like it.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Yeah,
no worries.
This is stressful. I can't see us, but I'm just going to look at the camera, pretend people can see me. Do you want to read this? This is our question for this month. Do you want to read it or shall I?
I do not mind reading it if that's okay with you.
I'd love for you to read it.
Okay. So the question is, I've been struggling in a long-term relationship. We are in therapy, but I'm still in doubt because it's been more struggle than not. I'm just curious what opportunities this year holds to gain clarity. I feel like I've been experiencing a lot of personal/spiritual growth and that things are getting better, but I'm struggling with accepting that things are getting better despite seeing it. Maybe I'm just fooling myself.
Yes. Do you want to open up with your thoughts?
So, yeah, I mean, and I love what you did in some of the future slides. We asked some typical questions here because the first thing that I want to do, I'm an astrologer, but I'm also a certified life spiritual coach, all those things. And I've done a lot of healing work, certified in like a bunch of healing modalities and practices. And so my thing here is, it looks like It reminds me, there's this, I think it's a Japanese or Chinese proverb, and I apologize that I do not remember the exact origin, but they would diagnose illnesses by saying, "When did you stop singing?"
Oh,
Yeah. And so in this, what I'm seeing and what I end up seeing in the chart as well is there's a lot of, I can't trust my own judgment, and it's
mhm.
hard to feel anchored in something, and I see it, but I'm not sure I can believe it because of previous experiences. So when I look at this question, my first instinct is you're doing a lot of good things. I see this person as, we're in therapy, but I'm still in doubt. First of all, bring that up in therapy.
Yep.
Make sure you don't hold that in, because if it's acknowledged, it can be worked with. And we'll talk about it here, of course, as well. But what I'm seeing is this opportunity where someone is saying, I am out of my scope. I'm out of my depth. I'm going to make sure that not only I get seen, but the other person in this relationship gets seen. And someone is there to be an objective opinion and to give us strategies that are outside of our own heads, because what we've done on our own perhaps has been, has been a narrow focus. We need to broaden it. So I think this person is wise and brilliant, but I
Yeah.
can understand the fear of, I've been through this before. I don't want to end up maybe isolated or feeling alone, or those feelings that we don't want to feel, and that's what causes the doubt, is the fear that we will be left in those feelings in the end. And so I see someone who is like, all the evidence is lining up, but where's that other shoe? When's that other shoe going to drop?
So,
And that's what I look for. And maybe I'm fooling myself also, I would say that's somebody else that taught you to think that way.
absolutely. Building on that, right? It's interesting because my first thought was, and we'll look into the chart, and I think we can see it. First, I want to know, okay, so and I would ask this client, and I have some questions in the other page, but
Mhm.
they say, I've been feeling a lot. I feel like been experiencing a lot of spiritual personal growth, and that things are getting better. Now, they don't necessarily say with their relationship. And
Mhm.
so I'm thinking this is somebody who has been in couples therapy, but they've also been working on themselves for personal and spiritual growth. And, one of the things that I would check in about is maybe they've actually outgrown this relationship.
Mhm.
Maybe they're still struggling because it's not a good fit anymore, because they've grown out of it. And what I'd want to know is, if they're what are they struggling to accept? Are they struggling to accept that maybe they've grown and this relationship isn't fitting? So, that to me feels like a conflict I would want to mine here.
Mhm.
Can I pull I'm gonna, move this to I think the
Yeah,
questions are
the
next. I'm gonna
questions are on the very next slide, and they're really
fantastic.
good ones. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So, yeah. So the questions I would ask this person, I please add to them, Crystalline,
Yeah.
is, have you outgrown your relationship, right? I mean, obviously, it's not a question you could just answer, but something to think about rather.
Mhm.
And what do you want from your relationship, right? So if your relationship, there's still conflict and it's not working, right? Maybe when you started the relationship, it looked a certain way, but there's something that you want. M- Most people don't actually sit and think about what they want their relationships to look like.
Mhm.
And why are you struggling with accepting things that are getting better? And what are you holding on to?
Yeah, and I think those are really beautiful questions that really prioritize, and I think this is going to become even more relevant. We talk about
Yeah.
this later, but Venus, the planet of relationships and those sorts of things, in this person's chart is interesting, but also she's going to be retrograde in Leo
Yeah.
later this year. She's coming into Leo, I believe it's June 5th or so. I can look that up specifically to know
Yeah.
exactly when. But she's coming into Leo, and that's going to be huge, because Venus in Leo is, what do I love? What makes me feel loved? All of those things. And in relationship with a Venus retrograde in Leo, my inclination has been that we're going to be seeing a lot of people saying, am I seen in my relationship? Do I have what
Mhm.
I need in my relationship? And does it match this other person? Are they seen? Do they have what they need? And do those two things, both of us, go together? So these questions for everybody who's watching are really great Venus retrograde questions as well. If you
Yeah.
find that relationships do in fact become a theme for you when Venus retrogrades July through September.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always important to think about, have I outgrown the relationship? And that's not anybody's fault. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the benefits of therapy is that it approaches things from a nobody's at fault aspect. And I really appreciate that in my own experience and in my own work. What if no one's to blame, including you? And
Yeah.
this is just, paths diverging or paths rewinding themselves. So you can have a path that forks and never comes back together again, or you can have a braid, right? If they come
Yeah.
in like a braid and it's just, we're going through something, is it something that you can support each other's growth in and maintain a relationship during, which is going to happen in long-term relationships regardless. You are going
Yeah.
to have periods of growth.
Yeah.
In astrology, we call them transits, but they're also just known as life. And later you're going to find, is this path that they're going on, can I follow them, or is that something that they need to do with other people? We think we do this with friends all the time. It happens, right? So if the friend or if the other person in the relationship goes on a path that you would not be served to follow and do not support, like not support them, but
Yeah.
it's more of like, I can't walk that path because it would be bad for me, but I know that it's good for you. It's that whole, if you love them, let them go. And if it's meant to be, they come back. That if it's meant to be, they come back thing could be weeks, could be days, could be months, could be years, could be whatever. But it's just the willingness to say, if I'm not attached to this, if I
Yeah.
don't need another shoe to drop, if I'm not, because if you're scared and you're worried that you're fooling yourself, you're attached to something. You're attached to
Absolutely.
needing something to be some certain way.
I like that the braid analogy was really beautiful, that people come in and out of our lives. And and the other part is not even just like letting, like, not always can I follow that path,
Mhm.
but sometimes, especially if we're going through some sort of growth. I think of specifically like Saturn transits. Not always, especially though, right? We're having that sort of like, I'm becoming a different person psychologically, physically, and we come to a point where the things that we need to do, right, take us away from other people, and that's kind of like there's a sadness to that too, um,
Mhm.
where we need to do something that no one can follow, or we need to, like, when oftentimes if you grow out of a relationship, it's because it's almost like you're a different person, right? And we see
Mhm.
that, the mirroring, and suddenly it's a whole different dynamic because the other person is in a relationship with someone completely different.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're here, you're alive, so you're growing, you're changing.
Yeah.
Like, that is the one thing that I feel is so important, is to remember that while we have the desire for consistency in life in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, change is truly the only constant. Whether it's slow or fast, and sometimes it's going to be one or the other, and sometimes it might feel like both all at once. We have the need for things to grow, to change. If they
Yeah.
stayed the same, nothing would happen, or it would be cramped, or it would stunt who you are. You wouldn't feel like you anymore. And if things become stagnant at some point, I love that this person is saying, hey, what's the potential here? What can we do? I want to work through this. And you are. And you're
Yeah.
seeing growth. And I like your question, is like, is that growth you? Is it them? Is it both? How is
Yeah.
that working together? Because a one and another need to take care of themselves individually in order for both to work.
Absolutely. And as we move to the chart, I want to say
Mhm.
we're going to see this person has a Scorpio moon, and right, it's been a difficult eclipse season. If you talk
Mhm.
about, like, we're talking about stagnant water, right?
Yep.
Scorpio moon kind of have difficulties because it can be so sensitive, right?
Yeah.
Feel this because it doesn't want change. And I think for a lot of people, this eclipse season has forced people to, like, let go of some attachments, whether they be physical attachments or story attachments.
Mhm.
Um, ooh, and so let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. And see, this is where Venus comes into play. And I also want to kind of lead in right
Yeah.
away by noting that Venus in several timing techniques, but one of the prominent ones and the most personal ones right now being annual perfection from the ascendant
Yep.
is the Time Lord.
Yeah.
This person is in a 5th house, which is romance, which is fun, which is relationship in that sense. They're in a 5th house year, and the eclipses later in the year will be taking place in this house,
Yeah.
which makes Venus, who is in the 12th house in domicile, but still in the 12th house,
Yeah.
the Time Lord for the year, but from the ascendant. And that's where both eclipses later this year are going to take place, in Taurus and in Libra. So these are going to be very impactful moments. And 12th house, I think, in modern context can be seen, it's the house of self-undoing. We do that
Yes.
consciously these days with therapy. And
Yes.
so I think
Yes.
it's really interesting that this is the time that this is happening. So first of all, I hope that this affirms to the person whose chart this is that you're following your timing. It
Yeah.
is like you're picking up what the universe is throwing down for you, or what the path is unfolding before you. You're doing a really good job with that. And as far as what the year holds, we'll talk about that more right now.
And also, what we did not
Mhm.
mention is how my mug matches this
Oh my
slide.
gosh. Yeah, it does.
That was
I
not
love
planned,
that.
even though I did make the slide. I digress. We're going to, as we break this apart, this
Mhm.
question, we're going to look at the 7th house, of course,
Mhm.
relationships.
I was going
If
to say.
we're starting with the natal promise, and we're going to look at Venus, right? Venus rules love, how we bind people together, bring people together. Interestingly enough, my friend Kristen Mathis, cosmic spirit auntie, who does a lot of translations of the Orphic hymns, always, I love her so much, talks about Venus a lot and says, Venus wants to bind, and she could bind, and she's not always good, right? Like Venus can,
Mhm.
like, if we look at Greek mythology, like love can get people in a lot of trouble,
Mhm.
right? It can bind us to things, to anguish. I'm not doing a really good representation of her whole sort of breadth of it there, but I'm going to say dovetail to say, if you're interested at all in these sort of planetary relationships, check out our friend Cosmic Spirit Auntie on Patreon and her Orphic hymns. And I'd love, maybe that's something we could do, is talk to her one day. But
Yeah.
anyways, thinking about this Venus in the 12th house, it's interesting because it's in domicile, right? So
Mhm.
it's, on one hand, it's like a strong Venus, but I was thinking that, it's in the 12th house, which can't see the ascendant. So in a sense, like Venus is kind of rogue in this chart, right?
Mhm.
She rules the 5th house, which is an important house, but she's doing it with, like, she is not asking permission from the native. She's
Yeah.
just like on her own journey here.
Yeah. Well, and in the chart, we also see by aspect,
Yeah.
she's not really reined in by anybody except for that moon and Saturn. So, the sun, Mercury, Mars, they don't see what Venus is up to. Jupiter does not see what Venus is up to because they're in aversion. They don't
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
a geometric aspect. The only thing she's got is oppositions from Scorpio, which has that Scorpio moon
Mhm.
and that Scorpio Saturn retrograde. And of course, they're not super, super. I would say that the moon is still in opposition by degree.
Yeah.
Give it a bit of a leeway, because within the last day or so, that opposition would have been perfect. But Saturn, they're both by sign. They're not super duper close, but they're both by sign. They still see her, and so she's over there thinking that she can get away with a lot of stuff. We think about the 12th house as sometimes vices as well, overindulging.
Yeah. Yeah.
When an indulgence becomes a vice, something that is really sweet can become super rich real quick. And so you think about that. And Saturn's over there like, maybe you should tone it down. So it's someone who's judging, but from afar. And so maybe that message doesn't get to you right away. So you overdo it. And then someone's like, wow, you really embarrassed yourself.
That's
And
a really sorry, going on.
that's where I hear the maybe I'm just fooling myself coming from. The
Mm.
moon is also there. The moon, and they're both in the 6th. So the moon is inclined to maybe not be as kind to the self here, right? The moon is in fall at this point in Scorpio. It's not the moon's favorite place to be, because while the moon loves flowing water and depth and emotion, Scorpio's like, but add some depth. And that's not
And water that does not move, by the way.
exactly. It's deep, but it's not spiritual deep. It's like deep as in investigating. It's deep as in what's being hidden. It's deep as in like where's the other boot or the other shoe. So it's got Saturn there saying, yeah, you know there's another shoe. I'm just not going to tell you where it is, but there's another shoe. Be afraid. And that's not fair. It's something definitely that this person will be working with in their life and
Yeah.
living as long as they have. You know, I'm looking at their chart. I know they've been around for a while. They've had at least their Saturn return. We can, confirm that they're going to be having their Uranus opposition 2026 ish. And so they've been around the block. They know what it's like to live this chart out, as you've pointed out before. So they've probably found ways to work with this. But when that sneaking suspicion comes up and they're in a vulnerable place, this might be their defense mechanism for Venus as well, when they're trying to let Venus be vulnerable, even though they can't really access her.
It's interesting because that word of that, like that doubt and negativity. And by the way, this person was born, like, I don't know.
1982.
Yeah, they were born like shortly after me. We have a very similar chart. So I'm like seeing that Venus Saturn opposition. Like I feel it. I don't have the moon Scorpio, but I do know that sometimes again, huh?
I have
Yeah, you do. Together we make a perfect pair. And I think that, also planets in the 12th house, even though they can work against us, right? This particular rogue Venus but they can like have a hard time being seen. And I think of that Venus in Taurus is like Venus wants to be loved and bring people together and those all these sort of beautiful things. And then Saturn's kind of like, but not yet. And there is that sense of like, that moon, it's almost like we'll start to talk about it, but that moon Saturn aspect just feels so heavy because there's so much about this chart that feels like lively and ambitious. But this feels like a particular like inherited weight.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that I think, especially if you see Saturn in Scorpio, there's a burden, but I can't talk about it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I really think is fascinating in this chart, and we're talking about it next, and stop me if we're not ready to move on to Jupiter, but there's really Jupiter, you would think in this chart would be doing a lot of like saving the day. And if tapped into, I think you might have that opportunity. I think it's something that might be learned later in life. And I'm going to explain exactly why. If you look at Jupiter, Jupiter is just nearly exactly 10 degrees and 53 degree minutes, where the descendant is 10 degrees and 50 minutes. Jupiter was setting at the moment this person was born. And if you see, there's that little chunk of Sagittarius here. Jupiter's in Sagittarius, domicile. Yeah. And the little chunk of Sagittarius where you see the little line in, that's Jupiter's own terms. So in Jupiter's house, in Jupiter's favorite room, like on Jupiter's favorite couch, he's in his man cave kind of thing. You would think like, this is a strong Jupiter, even supported by trine by the sun, who's exalted, right? Not looking at Saturn, not really looking at Venus. And yeah, Mars is by trine by sign, but that sun has a lot of support there. And if the sun and Jupiter are in trine, fun fact, this Jupiter is stationing.
Yeah.
So we see a stationary Jupiter, retrograde in the chart still, but in this change of phase. That's very important, especially since Jupiter will be ruling, as we point out here, the 10th as well as the 7th. So career, life purpose and direction, and the other and relationships. Life purpose and relationships are going to feel connected. And the fact that this is a long-term thing that requires a little bit of elbow grease, that's that retrograde hanging around thing there. And so when we get to the sort of summary of the chart, Jupiter played a big role in my idea when it comes to the summary of the chart, as well as Venus, for exactly a lot of the themes we're talking about. But what do you think about that?
When I look at that Jupiter, right, like you said, it's brilliant. It's a really strong Jupiter. It's stationing, right? So it's loud in that degree, in that degree, in that sense. It's on the descendant, right? It rules the 10th house, but it's also, it's in the same sign as the South Node. So my thoughts looking at this, the 7th house, I find it represents the other. Right. It's not necessarily like it's the other in relationships or where we experience those planets through our relationships. And I've noticed that oftentimes in clients, people can, especially as we like work through our charts, people often give away planets in the 7th house to their
Mm.
partners.
Oh, my
And
son in the 7th just hurt. That's so astute. You're right.
and so when I'm thinking of this, we're like, "Yo, you fuck yeah, Jupiter and Sagittarius, like, on the descendant," and you're like, that
Mhm,
Venus, that, like, rogue Venus, and I'm thinking, "Man, like, is this person maybe at a situation where they really idolized a partner, where they
mhm.
just they put so much into the relationship and they experienced their Jupiter through that relationship." And, and so maybe part of like this growing phase is stepping into their own Jupiter, right? It's interesting
Mhm,
that this relationship isn't quite working out, but they're having their own spiritual growth. And I'm like, is this a matter of you claiming your Jupiter? Of
mhm,
being well, actually, like I I am empowered, right? And something you often see is planets, it's interesting also Saturn's going through that 10th house, which is kind of bringing those subjects to the light as well, right? Like, who am I in the world? But something I've noticed just anecdotally with the nodes is often with that, like, the first the nodes in the first 7th house axis, there tends to be throughout the native's life, like a kind of trying, like a balancing out. Am I
mhm.
all in a relationship codependent, or do I need to break away and have time for myself? And so maybe they're working that out with this Jupiter story.
And that's a huge Sagittarius relationship story too. Sagittarius
Yeah.
often gets really enthusiastic, but then needs to detach and needs to have their freedom and needs to be able to follow the fun, really, in a lot of situations. And
Yeah.
sometimes long-term relationships make that hard because they're not
Mhm.
always the thing that glitters. Um, so you find that being a little bit of a situation for people with, and I know several people who are Gemini risings. So I've seen
Mhm.
this play out, and
Yeah.
I've seen them have successful long-term marriages as well. So for the person watching this, I'm not saying you're doomed. I'm saying that giving yourself freedom of expression, of individuality, and being individuals in the relationship who can be whole and complete and know themselves, that is what you give naturally to the other. And I
Yeah.
think just like what you're saying, CV, give it to yourself too, because it is about equality. You are a Gemini rising. That
Yeah.
whole this and that can work for you.
Absolutely, right, and thinking about adding to this, looking at that midheaven in Aquarius, and
Mhm,
something to consider is when we talk about long-term relationships, it's very important to remember that there's not one way to
mhm.
long-term relationship,
No.
right? And so maybe as you go through world and you step into maybe some of your desires for freedom and autonomy and independence, right? That might mean that you just need a relationship that offers those things, which
Mhm.
is very possible, right? We should know that there are multiple ways to relationship, and that's really
Mhm.
beautiful. And that might be something I'd bring up with this client.
Yeah. And, having your own space in a relationship is not a bad thing.
Hmm.
I've seen in headlines and things, I follow the news a lot because the news will reflect a lot of astrology,
Yeah.
but there are couples who each have their own apartment in the same city because it makes their relationship easier to do because they have their own space, they have their own time. Even my own partnership, I have my own room. He has
Yeah.
his own room. And it makes our lives so much better. When we tried to share space too much, we would wake up and not be the best of us. And that's what you woke up to every morning. And it started feeling like the relationship was struggling. And one day it was, can I just have my own room? And would you want that? And it was like, oh, thank God. I didn't want to be the first to say it. And then all of a sudden, we got the rest we needed. We had the time and the space we
Yeah.
needed. And that kind of thing can happen. So it's not a failure if it doesn't meet societal standards of relationship. Those A are changing,
Yep.
and B can be whatever you want them to be because it's nobody else's opinion but yours that matters.
Absolutely. Um, I wanna keep myself I could just hop in and keep in the subject, but I'm gonna change
Yeah.
slides right now.
Woo.
Um,
I
this
love
is
our
how we're
slides, by the way. Thank you, CV.
oh my goodness, thank you. This is how we're keeping ourselves on track today.
It's beautiful.
Um, okay. Woo, and here we go. Now we are gonna talk. So this person wanted to know, okay, like, what's in
Mhm.
store for me this year? And welcome to Perfections. Take it over,
Yeah.
Crystalline.
So the reason we're choosing perfections as a timing technique for this is because A, this is a 1 hour live broadcast thing. There are many timing techniques in astrology, and in preparing notes and things, we did bring that into consideration into our holistic interpretation.
Yeah.
But to be able to share with you one of the more common and known timing techniques that's really helpful and powerful and relevant is annual perfections. So the perfection of the year, right?
Yeah.
And if you'll permit me, CV, I can actually
Yeah.
read the definition of this by Demetra George in her Ancient Astrology Volume 2 book, because she just does a really great job of kind of assessing this. And it's something that I've been studying lately as far as ancient astrology goes as well. So in Ancient Astrology Volume 2 by Demetra George, literally on page 1183, it's in the glossary, she describes perfections as a symbolic timing procedure in which each sign is individually activated.
Yep.
In zodiacal order. So starting with Aries, Taurus, and in this case, we're starting with the ascendant. So we'll be starting with Gemini. And then we move, it's a fifth house perfection year for this person. So we move to the fifth house, which is Libra. 5 from the ascendant, starting in the ascendant, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gives you Libra. Annual perfections move 1 sign per year. And the matters of the house occupied by the perfected sign are emphasized for that period of time. This is where we got the romance thing for the fifth house, possibly being a theme. The planet that rules the perfected sign, in this case, Venus, is the Time Lord and influences the outcome of the house's matters. So Venus's movements through the chart will add action to the story. The theme of the story is fifth house matters, but what's happening in that story? So it's a story about fifth house matters in which the character Venus does A, B, C, D, and E. The Time Lord governs the life for the duration of the perfection. So again, the Time Lord Venus takes over as sort of the angel on your shoulder for the duration of the perfection, in this case, annual for the year from your solar return to the next solar return. So it's your year, not necessarily the calendar year.
Yeah.
And then last line here that I want to bring up is during that time, it, the Time Lord, Venus in this case, has the opportunity to bring out its significations as indicated in the natal chart. This is why we went over Venus in the natal chart so thoroughly, because now it's her time to shine.
So I'm going to do this, the big recap of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'm going to dive in to say that we have just launched our Patreon, Ask Me Astros,
Mm-hmm.
where we, as you've mentioned earlier, are taking deep dives with our Astro studies, 2 workshops per month.
Mm-hmm.
And this month, we will actually be taking a deep dive into perfections. So while we will briefly touch on them here, if
Mm-hmm.
you're interested in learning more with us, specifically if you're interested in learning astrology through story and writing prompts, I encourage you to join us for that workshop. That being said, right, to sort of summarize is that, yeah, Venus is important this year. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to pay attention to what she's doing in the chart and what her we want to pay attention to what she's doing in the chart and how her houses are getting spoken to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how those topics are coming up. So it's really important to notice where Venus is.
Yeah.
One of the things that I look for on this is where was Venus in the solar return. So I did bring up Russ. Russ is our viewer. Sorry, Russ. Hi, Russ. I did bring up the solar return for this person who is not Russ. And I looked at the potentials there. Like, what is Venus saying? Hey, this is my moment for the year that sets the tone. This is like Venus picking out her outfit for the day or packing her bag for the trip, saying, I intend to look this good on the trip. And I'm using these things because these are very Venusian terms.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of Venus work today. So in the solar return, how was Venus? Was she more comfortable, better suited, more supported than she is in the natal chart? Does that mean, and if so, does that mean that it will be a better than average year as far as Venus stuff goes? That's something that you can look into. And honestly, in the solar return, yes, Venus was doing really well. In fact, she was in Taurus again, and there was a lot going for her. But because she was in Taurus again, that means still in the 12th house. So I think the option of using therapy this year is something that is very divinely inspired and, again, very attuned, a very smart thing to do.
Absolutely. It's interesting. This person mentioned, and I'll also note this, that if you're interested in looking at solar perfections again, digging into this, join us to Ask Me Astros, because we will get more into this. We're kind of touching on it now.
Yeah.
And anonymous person, we are offering you readings so we can spend more time with this client's chart with them, getting into that.
Yeah, great point. If you submit your question to Ask Me Astros for something like this, for exactly this, like next month, and we choose your question, you do get a free reading with both of us individually. So that's 2 free readings. We'll send you that code in the email if we choose your chart. For everybody else, though, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Look at the bottom of the screen.
Wonderful. So working on that Venus, right? Going back to that, I keep thinking about, man, this eclipse season has been so pivotal for this person, right? The Ketu, the South Node, going over their moon, maybe forcing them to think about what are some of those really, like, I want to say deep, like, attachments, stories they've been holding on to, right? And having to, like, let go of this. And the therapy, this person mentioned couples therapist, but I'd say right now this could be really empowering for you to have your own therapist, almost to like, and not even just, I would go beyond therapy and have some sort of like goal and think about, now how am I going to start to work with Venus? How am I going to like really dive in? Also thinking a little different, that the North Node is now going to be on your sun, right? So there might be some changes with your solar purpose. So even when we think about therapy, there's a sense of like cleaning up this past 18 months, and also a little bit of like, how do I want to work with this Venus? Thinking about its Venus and Taurus too. How are you working with your body? How are you communicating with the physical world? Which might be something to think about as well. Maybe there's a sense of like hidden artist or hidden craft, or is it like hidden chef within you or something, or just needing to like be more embodied in the physical world.
Well, and especially with Venus in the 12th house, how do you embody your spiritual beliefs in your daily world? How do you allow that to not, because if we don't live a life according to what we truly feel, believe, and need, we are going to create dis-ease.
Yeah.
The opposite side of the 12th house is the 6th house, which is where we see health and illnesses sometimes crop up. And you have your moon also in the 6th house. So taking care of your body is something that is a balance. Emotions are going to play into how you feel, even that if that just manifests as stress and overexertion and things like that. And you're probably not the person who tells people when you're not feeling okay, because you've got a moon in Scorpio.
And so, Crystal Lynn knows. You brought up a great point too, right? Like that's 12th house, 6th house to access has everything to do with the body. And so there's sometimes people can become like therapy junkies in the sense they can be like really in their head, which maybe there's something about like, are you just on the very basic level, but like, are you also attending to your body?
This, and when you said therapy junkie, there's therapy that's useful, but again, it's a 12th house thing. So it's useful until it's avoidance. So if you're using therapy, I say this to my clients in astrology all the time, and forgive me, this is my Scorpio moon in the 1st house talking. I'm not doing astrology to tell you you're pretty. I'm doing astrology because we know you're pretty and we want to give you something to do about it and something to do with it, something to do to make your life feel amazing. And so that is the way that I support, or I personally have the opinion of using therapy. Therapy is meant to be a self-knowing, a transformational process, It's for breakthroughs. It's for understanding. It's for clarity. If you're doing it to feel justified all the time, and that's all the farther you're going to go, you're not willing to grow. And with Venus in the 12th, I would assume you are willing to grow, but you also have Chiron there. So I'm wondering how you've tried to grow and perhaps have had a struggle with that and have had to really learn through some hefty growth in your life, possibly through relationships with people. And so that may have burned you a little bit. You may be afraid to come out of your shell in those things. It's okay, but let therapy be the tool that guides you out of that brings you out of the shell, instead of something that just stays there, says a lot of pretty things, but never gets anywhere. Poetry, unless it makes you feel something and changes you and becomes art, is just words.
I love that. That's really well said.
That one felt really good, which is why I just stopped talking.
Ooh, yeah, like I know that one. And I'm going to switch the slides on that one because we are short on time, and I'm going to make sure that we get all of our points touched. And so I'm going to just open this up to say that we don't have a lot of time to dig into this particular technique, but I want you to explain it to people and share some of your findings.
Yeah, so this is something that is something we're going to be going into with students in the AMA Patreon, because perfecting from the ascendant is one way to do things. It's fine. It works. It is one way to do it. It is not the only way. And actually, in ancient astrology, if you read the Anthology, which is written by Vettius Valens, who is one of our like oldest sources of astrology from ancient Egypt, because at the time an astrologer was basically one astrologer for an entire family, same family all the time, not different clients every day, they were able to commit themselves to wholly and completely these charts. And so to him, it's perfect from everything. See what Venus is doing this year by perfection. See what Jupiter is doing this year by perfection. How are they connecting to each other? It gets really elaborate and beautiful and intricate, like a tapestry, for the purposes of the astrology that we can do today, because we work with so many people. I think the ascendant's really great. Another one that I'm incorporating is from the sect light. The sect light in this case, because this person was born during the day, because the sun is above the ascendant descendant line, we know that the sect light is the sun. So perfecting from the sun is an option. There are more intricate ways to dig deep. And in our personal readings with you, person whose chart this is, we will get into those if you're interested. But perfecting from the sect light is important as well. And we have quotes from Vettius Valens on the next two slides that explain that. But because these are the givers of life, they are the givers of light, they actually translate the light to us, and they're close to us. They're personal. The ascendant is the sort of the initiation point of our whole lives. If you want to do the length of life technique, you start at the ascendant. If you want to circumambulate, you start at the ascendant. If you want to perfect, if you want to know anything, if you want to even create a chart, you start at the ascendant. It is us. It is our unique signature in the chart that sets everything else up. So of course, it's very relevant to our lives. And the quote that I love so much that lightly touches on that is Valens saying, and it's two slides away, I know.
Okay, here, let me do this. Can I add on to that before you read the Valens quotes too? And I'll get to pull the slide up.
Go for it. Because
something that I think about as well, right? The ascendant in the astrology chart is physically us. Like when we have planets that go through the transits through the ascendant, it can be like physical or psychological change, like we experience them. And I tend to, the luminaries, would you agree, maybe have a sense of like what we're doing in the world, our sense of purpose.
Yeah. So the sun, believe it or not, the sun is spirit. It is what your purpose is. The moon is fortune. So it's more your physical existence.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the moon, you're saying bodily, how are things going? You know, am I going to have a fortunate year with resources, livelihood, those things that keep me running?
Yes.
With the sun, you're also looking at what's the quality of life going to be like during this year? Do I feel fulfilled? Am I going to have a happy time, or is it going to be spiritual growth? Whatever the qualities are, depending on benefics and malefics and all those other complications in the term that they like complicate and make something even more elaborate.
And then the last thing is something you touch upon is that the idea again of sect, right? So there is going to be a difference in the overall, how shall I say, sense of how one does life. If you're if you're a solar daytime chart, right, there might be more of a concern with being public, being out in the world, being, we could say, more young. Versus if you have a nighttime chart, right, there might be more of a sense of like contemplation, reflection, and it just is sort of a general way of doing life.
Yeah. And it's also important to note that, as we mentioned on this slide, the sun and the moon help determine the lots of spirit / diamond, same thing, and the lots of fortune. Now, a lot of the time you'll see this in zodiacal releasing, where they'll say a lot of fortune tells you the quality of life for the year, livelihood wise, the way we explain. A lot of spirit tells you the quality of life, reputation, and all that other stuff, your personality and personal experience. It is important to note that Valens does get into the lots actually being attuned to the nature of your life a little bit more. So there's a lot to dig into. If you're interested, you can find it in book 4 of Valens, the Anthologies. Plenty to get into there. But those are really good generalizations to use. They work just fine. When you want to dive deeper, and it's something that we'll probably get into in our Patreon a little while, there is more. There's more layers. There's more to make it even more personal and beautiful and relatable.
Absolutely. Ooh, maybe we should read Valens together. Book 4. Yeah. I have no patience for book 1. I
like this one. It tells me what I'm doing.
Like whatever. We're moving on.
I can make work in my head. Yeah.
I'm going to get to the quote though, because I know Okay, it's the
Yeah.
next one, right? This one.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll go here and then we'll go back.
Okay, so this is about the ascendant because Valens talks a lot about perfecting from the lot. See, lot of fortune, diamond, love, necessity, and in fact, all the planets. So then you're like, well, what about the ascendant? That's the one we use the most.
Yeah.
This is the line I found that is the most frank and pertinent to the ascendant. But it is more scientific to count from the angles, the ascendant being the primary angle that we look at, because what is true of the general and cosmic is also found to be true of men, because we are a product of our universe. And I love that so much. So I thought that was really great. And of course, I even list the page here for you to find it. It's the very first line of the second paragraph on that page if you're interested.
Beautiful. Thank you for putting these together, Kristen. And I'm going to go back and we're going to go to the next quote.
Mhm.
We are wrapping this up.
Yeah, this describes the significations of the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, why they're so important.
Okay.
So the quote is, to find the overall influence in any nativity, it will be necessary to count the years. This is your annual perfections. Count the years from the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. These three figures have great influence, and that's because they are the lights. They move so much. They are some of the fastest movers. I mean, the sun isn't the fastest, but the moon certainly is.
And I would like to say, this is our ancient reference to what's your sun, moon, rising?
Yeah. The Greek for that is aphetas, and they are in Valens. So the sun, moon, rising that you see on social media is relevant to ancient astrology. It's APHETA, apheta, or apheta.
Okay. Wait, what is apheta? Apheta is like
your sun, moon, and rising.
Oh my God, there's
yeah, that's what they're called. They're your general aphetas because they're basically your default time lords because they do so much. If you're doing another time lord technique, you might call that time lord an apheta. Often they're called a chronocrator.
Ooh, I love this. I love that. See, our pop culture has ancient roots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some stuff you see on social media is relevant, believe it or not.
Nice. Okay, look at this.
Cool.
Okay, I made a slideshow. What's next? Okay, these are our chart. We have words.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome us.
Yeah. So one of the things I like to do for clients is I'll look at their chart and say, okay, if I had to summarize this in a sentence and just translate the chart, what would it be? And because of that Jupiter, because of that Venus, like we talked about earlier, seeking self with a capital S in others. This is incorporating the 12th house, the spirituality of Jupiter being on the descendant, the other place. So we're seeking definition, meaning, so many other things in experience of others. We're watching it be reflected back at us. There's, of course, the effective and skillful way to do this. And then there's some ways where this might trip us up on occasion.
Absolutely. I'm going to add to that. My term was learning to release. But I'm going to expand on that and say that my summarization of the chart is also reclaiming the fiery parts of your chart, right? Once again, thinking about that big Jupiter in the 7th is like, maybe part of it is like learning to release. I think specifically was my nod to that Scorpio moon. I think of like reclaiming your Jupiter, right?
Yeah.
Like what bigness do you want to be in the world, which is making a trine to that big sun in Aries with your ascendant ruler, Mercury, right? Hanging out in Aries. So there's something about, we talked a little bit about the more difficult parts of the chart, but there's also something really big and bright and like ferocious about this chart. And I think a lot of this work, this Venus work, I think, to like once you work with the more difficult parts of the chart, I think it's like, especially with the eclipses, really like finding your fire.
Yeah.
Finding your fire. That's my final term.
I love that. And I also want to say, because of so much of what you said and looking at the chart, there's a lot of fire in the chart. There's that Scorpio moon. You may have been told you're a lot, or that you're intense, or that you come on strong. And that may be why you hold yourself back. That Venus with Chiron might be a result of that, with Venus opposite the moon and Saturn and all that stuff. There's a lot in here that says, people have told me I'm a lot, so I work really hard to hold myself back. What if you found people that could handle a lot and didn't think it was a lot?
Like us, because I think we've had this discussion. We have both been through life having been told we are a lot individually. Now we're a lot together.
Yeah, now we're a lot, and we just found people who can handle that. Because I hope that you have the faith in knowing that even if you don't feel surrounded by people who see you, accept you, and can can sit in your space, there are those people out there. There's so many people, you'll find them.
And it's something as you're talking, and maybe I'm biased because of my own Jupiter in Sagittarius, but I think there's something about Jupiter in Sagittarius that has this almost like special quality
Mhm.
of being able to like jump and have the universe catch you, right? Like I think of
Oh,
Jupiter and
absolutely.
Sagittarius as a sense of like faith, as being able to take risks.
Mhm.
And so thinking about, right, the fearfulness of like that Scorpio moon of not wanting to change, not wanting to, do things, but thinking that, right, maybe if you let go of a relationship that no longer serves you, you might be surprised how that Jupiter comes to the rescue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's really great.
Thank you. Now we're gonna slideshow coming to an end. Now I'm gonna like do this is the grace and the challenge.
So this is kind of what I was saying with the there's an upside, there's a downside, and then there's a balance to pretty much everything, right? So the grace of seeking self in others is what we've mentioned all along. You're so good at being benevolent toward other people, giving people freedom, giving people insight, giving people wisdom, giving. And as CV said, sometimes you have to remember to give that to yourself. It
Yeah.
has to be an equal exchange of energy. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. It's the whole airplane thing of make sure you have the oxygen mask on you before helping others, because if you pass out, you're not helping anybody. Now, the challenge in that, of course, is not putting the oxygen mask on yourself. So if you're seeking your identity, your validation externally in other people, you're going to get their perspective of you. And that's not going to match the same as what you see or as what you can be, or it's going to be limited to their worldview. And you don't get to see the world in their eyes. You see it through your eyes, which is unique and special. And you're the one who's here to see it that way. So you might find that you, in times where you're not feeling at your best, there's avoidance of self through self-undoing, that exertion of therapy. Or perhaps you may offer help more gracefully than you receive it. Here, let me do that for you, because then maybe I'll feel fulfilled again. And almost like helping other people can become kind of a drug if you're not giving yourself enough development, growth, nurturing at the same time. A lot
Absolutely.
of us fall into this. It is not, I'm not blaming, I'm not judging. I'm saying if this feels right, it's okay. But there are some other ways that you might be able to make that feel a little bit more graceful.
And I'm going to add very quickly to that, is that with those Aries placements, I have a feeling that if you seek validation in others and it's not working out, right, there's going to be a point where you might sabotage unconsciously a relationship, because I
Mhm.
think of that Aries energy, it's survival at all costs. And so it's interesting to think of that conflict too, like, okay, I'm going to support this person, and that to some extent, just like if it's not working, right, that sense of being suffocated, and almost again, like if you're not aware of it, maybe sabotaging relationships and seeing that as a shadow as well.
Mhm.
And now we've gone over. This is fantastic. What's our next? I think our next slide is our. Oh, yay! It's the best
Yay.
slide. It's our outro slide.
Yes.
So, we're gonna do this outro before my computer dies. What a perfect timing here. I am CV Henriette, if you might have gathered that thus far. This is Crystalline Vitovich. I pronounced your name right. I always
You did.
feel like
Yeah,
we've been
that's
friends
perfect.
for a long time. I should know this. Um, and we have a new website. It's Ask Me Astros. So you can ask us Astros, and
Mhm.
you can actually I'm gonna have you take it from here.
So you can go to askmeastros.com. There's a
Yeah.
button there where you can ask us anything. It'll take you straight to the email if you want to. So you'll be able to submit your question there. Totally easy, super fun. Ask us about your chart. If you've ever looked at social media and thought, what does that mean for me? This is why we created this. We want to
Yeah.
be able to answer that. This gives us enough time and space to do it. And if you want to learn more from us, with us in a community, which is amazing, really gleaning and getting more out of traditional astrology, you can even join our Patreon from that website. So askmeastros.com, one-stop shop. You can also follow us personally. I'm at The Real Crystalline on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere. And CV is Art of the Zodiac with underscores between each word on Instagram. Beautiful stuff. Highly recommend following.
Thank you. And I just remembered what the next slide we're missing for next month's presentation.
Hmm.
Um, our handles At any rate, so yes, if you send us a question, everyone who sends a question automatically gets a discount code for a reading with us. If we choose your chart, you get a reading with both of us or one of us, whatever you're comfortable,
Which one
whatever
you
you're up
want.
for. And as I mentioned earlier, this weekend, we're in late May. We're going to be at Norwalk, and we will do a special IG Live to address anyone who had a question last month that we didn't get to. Some of them are sort of general, and we're going to do an IG Live where we address some of them. So if you did submit your question and we didn't answer it, stay tuned to our social medias because we will announce at IG Live. Sound good? Am I missing anything?
Nope, I just got our handles up there anyway for anybody who was interested.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll see you at Norwalk in
Yeah,
like
in a couple days.
2 days
We're
or
gonna spend
something.
so much time together because we're also going to Greece. So fun.
Oh my goodness. This is
Yeah.
great. Any I think that's our outro. We're good?
Yeah, yeah. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. Stay safe. Remember, keep your cool. There's a lot going on out there. We're all feeling it.
Bye.
Bye.